Welcome to Revo-Tone Studios. Yeah, so this is kind of like bassland. I keep all the basses here. This is also kind of like just the Fender station. We've got a 50s road-worn P bass. This is actually, believe it or not, this is like from the year 2017. So this is the bass that makes it on most of the recordings, especially when I'm working with singer-songwriters. I'm playing bass, just a bass that works on like everything. And then this is a JMJ road-worn Mustang bass. It's got flats on it. This thing is super cool. I play this bass all the time in the Rolling Stones tribute band I'm in. But this makes its way onto a lot of rock stuff, a lot of indie stuff. It's just a great bass. It's got a little bit of like growl to it, which is cool. So it finds its way in a lot of stuff too. And then this thing is like a cool studio trick. So this is it's the Squier version, but it's a Fender 6 bass. So it's kind of like, it's tuned a lower octave than a guitar. So like you still have E, A, D, G, B, E, but it's just down an octave from what a guitar is tuned to. So it like kind of crosses the bridge between baritone guitar and bass. It's kind of like in between that. So you can play chords on it like high up and stuff, but you can play single note lines too. I used this as a bass for a little bit. This was like the first bass I actually bought, just because I was in a Beatles tribute band for a long time, and the Beatles used this on their later recordings whenever John Lennon or George Harrison would play bass on a song. So like Hey Jude and Let It Be, this was the bass that was used. So I had this originally from my Beatles tribute days, but it's really cool. It's a great tool to like double track like a bass part on for like spaghetti western stuff or like a tic-tac sound. And then we have a hodgepodged Fender Strat. So this is like a Mexican body, and this is an American neck. But I don't like play Strats a ton, but this is just kind of like my open G guitar. So this is just around the studio, out of tune open G guitar, but it's just around the studio to for an alternate tuning, just for some inspiration with the and with the Keith Richards thing, the 6th string is taken off, so it's just 5 strings, open G. And then this is the drum station. So this is a 1965 Ringo kit. My brother's a drummer, this is his kit, it just stays here. There's another kit here too, which we'll get to. But this was originally like a walnut finish, and it was rewrapped to match Ringo's kit. This was the kit my brother used in our Beatles tribute band. Yeah, it's great. It's got a great sound. We have a Shure Beta 52 microphone mounted inside the kick drum, which is super cool. So that's already in there. We don't have to worry about that. There's this little XLR mount on top that's just always live and plugged in. And then depending on the project I'm doing, sometimes I'll also mic the outside of the kick drum, and that's usually some kind of a condenser mic. This snare is like Ringo Starr spec. It's a jazz festival snare, which is what he used for the longest time, most of the early Beatles stuff. Zildjian cymbals, custom-made hi-hats. I recently switched to using these Evans drum heads. They sound really good. I love these tom drum heads because a lot of times when we're tracking stuff, we want some dampening on the toms. The way these heads are made, they have some when they bake them, they have some oil in them or something like that. So it basically sounds like, it already sounds how you want it to sound when you're recording without having to put any towels or tape or anything on it. So they sound pretty good. They need to be tuned. It's been a while since we've done a drum session over here. And then this is like my typical drum mic setup. I usually have stereo overheads, some condenser mics. I just recently picked up a new pair of Sonys. It's a EV357 on the tom-tom, an old Sennheiser 421, one of the original ones, 421N. So it has this switch on it actually for like voice or for music. Because when they first made those, I think they were originally intended as like voice recorder mics or for like interviews and stuff. Like I said, there's a Beta 52 inside the kick drum. Snare top is always usually a 57 for me. And then I always have like a mono kit mic, which is this fathead ribbon. And then this is something I started doing recently out of necessity. I needed just like whatever extra mic I had for a talkback mic for the drummer. This is an AKG D12 of all things, which sometimes I have in front of the kit if somebody brings their own kit in. But what I've been doing lately is I record this while tracking drums, and I just crush the shit out of it on the console and just get it like a little crispy and overloaded and just kind of blend that in with the drum sound. It's cool. And then last but not least, the crotch mic. So that's cool. I usually compress the shit out of that. It gets some really snappy beater side head of the kick drum and then some under snare. This solves two purposes for me, and that's usually why I never really feel the need to do a snare bottom mic. And then we have, you know, Stickland over here. We've got the headphone station for the drummer. We've got the Behringer PowerPlay personal monitor system. So there's a couple of those around the studio for artists and the musicians to be able to hear themselves, and these are super user-friendly. The musicians can create their own mix themselves on the little guys' monitor controllers, so it's super cool. You'll see these are on the studio. These are just the Sony run-of-the-mill, you know, the classic MDR 7506 headphones. So we've got between those and then some AKG headphones for all the monitor stations for the musicians. So this studio existed before we moved here. So the people that owned the house before had built out these two separate rooms. This down here was already split into a live room and a control room. The double pane window was there. They did all of this wood diffusion on this wall, and those two diffusers over here, they did all that themselves and left it. They knew that my brother and I were musicians, so they just, they asked us if we wanted them to leave some of the stuff here, and we were like, yeah. And they left a lot of the acoustic treatment, and then I've put stuff up as needed, some packing blankets. Eventually, I'm gonna get more sound treatment down here because you can always use more. Like I want to get some panels on the ceiling here, and then my plan is to just leave this part of the ceiling without sound treatment. So if I ever want to like mic this for like drum room mic, just miking the ceiling and getting like the just the ambience of that, that'll be an option. I like having this room kind of like dual purpose. So a lot of there's baffles over here. So when I have a band come in to track, I'm of the school of thought of trying to get all the musicians playing together in the room as much as possible. If it's not possible for everybody, then we try to do like groups, like at least having the bass and the drums together. I like being able to have this room be open, but if we need to deaden stuff and like if we want a super, super tight drum sound, we'll put these baffles up around the drummer. And then I also have these gobos and baffles to baffle off people's amps when they're in here playing live. So a lot of times we'll take those and just section off the amps so that we're not getting bleed into the drum mics or the bass mic or the guitar mic, so there's not too much bleed. I honestly don't mind a little bit of bleed if you listen to all your favorite like 60s and 70s recordings of live bands, there's always some bleed in there, and that just kind of like is part of the vibe. Okay, so this is kind of like bassland. This is usually when we're tracking a full band, or even if somebody's just doing overdubs, this is kind of like bass section. This is a reissue of the Vox T60 bass cabinet that Paul McCartney used in the earlier Beatle days. And then this is just like your run-of-the-mill backline GK 600 head. So it's kind of a blend of both. And sometimes we switch, you know, we'll use the Sun head on the Vox cab. Sometimes we'll use the GK head on the Ampeg cab. This head is a little bit more like modern sounding, and it's got like a dirt channel so you can overdrive it. So that's always fun. And this amp has more EQ options if we need it. And then my favorite bass rig that's in here is this. This is a 73 Sun concert bass head. But it's not tube, but it's all transformers. It's solid state. I remember the first time I heard one of these, my buddy had a studio in Oak Park when we were in college, and he had one of these, and we were tracking some stuff there. And the first time I played this, through one of these, I fell in love with it. So a couple years later, I ended up buying one. This thing is just a workhorse. It sounds amazing, and especially paired with the Ampeg cabinet. I think this is a B4 or B40 cabinet. So the cab is from 74, I believe, and the head is from 73. It might be flip-flopped, I can't remember. Both of them reverb purchase. And then this cab was purchased from, I don't think they're in business anymore, but there is a company in Wisconsin that did a lot of Vox recreations and Beatles, like Beatle gear specific. And so that's where this cab came from. It's hard to find like a reissue or redone version of these. The only ones you can find are vintage usually, and those are kind of hard to come by. When I'm usually recording bass, I'm usually doing one mic if it's a band playing in the room, and this is just an old EV PL80 dynamic microphone. I like that on bass cab, it sounds great. So I usually, when there's a band playing in the room live, I do one mic, it's a dynamic mic, so there's not much bleed, and then I do a DI. And then sometimes, depending on the sound we're trying to get, if we're trying to get like a Beatles bass tone or just more options, a lot of times I'll swing one of these condenser mics over there and mic the cab and have two mics on the cab, and then also a DI. That's usually how I do bass. Then we have a Vox AC30 here. That's a reissue from the mid-2000s, sounds great. I believe it has Warfendale speakers in it. That's always mic'd up with a Shure SM57, you know, tried and true guitar amp mic. Most of my school of thought when doing tracking is, like I said before, having as many people playing live in the room as possible. So that's always mic'd up there, so there can be a guitar station here if needed. I like to have as much stuff like just set up and ready to go, so when inspiration strikes or creativity happens, we don't have to like patch in gear or like re-mic something. Like occasionally we have to do that, but I try to leave all the drum mics set up pretty much this way. Depending on the group that's coming in or the drummer coming in or for whatever vibe we're going for, I'll do different miking techniques or change up the mics or something, but drums are always set up ready to go, usually in this configuration. Same thing with bass. I always at least just have the one cab mic and DI ready to go. And the guitar amps are always mic'd up if we just, we have the AC30 here. There's another AC30 over there and a little Marshall combo. And so over there, we can easily just switch the mic to the other amp if we need to use that one. This area right here is when people are doing overdubs, doing vocals or like acoustic guitar. We usually do them right here. This is usually where I have the singer stand. This is a good spot in the room where it's not super dead, but it's not super live either. I kind of like having that. And I find with tracking vocalists, and especially some of the people I work with, it's their first time recording in a studio or first time singing in a studio, and I've just found from a psychological perspective, I get a better performance from them if they're not shoved into a little vocal booth. It's usually a better experience for everyone, and better performance is given from the artist when they can just be free out in the room I've found in my experience. So this is where I usually do vocals. This is one of my workhorse mics, my favorite vocal mic. Right now it's beating everything else out usually, but it's a WA-47, so it's a recreation of the famous Neumann U-47 that the Beatles used. The Beatles used the U-48 because that one was in a figure 8 pattern. This is a very common mic, also used by Frank Sinatra, sang on a bunch of stuff, but this is the Warm Audio recreation of a 47. And I love it. It's got a nice smooth top end. The mid-range is fantastic on it, so that works on a wide variety of vocalists. And if we're looking for something more airy for vocals, these are the two mics I constantly interchange on vocals. This was my main vocal mic for a while, this Revo-Tone CV12. It's in the vein of like a 251 or a AKG C12. It's obviously less expensive than that, but this was like the first, and both of these are tube condensers, which I just love the sound of those. This was the first like nicer microphone that I had, the Revo-Tone CV12. I love this. This lives majority of the time if we're not using it for vocals, because this is kind of like my main vocal workhorse at the moment. This is always on like acoustic guitar or mandolin or ukulele, banjo, any kind of acoustic instrument. Either of these also work great as like a drum room mic, so if we're just doing a drum day in here, a lot of times I'll throw on one of these as like the room mic, and it always sounds good. So this is keyboard / guitar land. This guy, one of my favorite keyboards. I didn't have one, and I was playing in another Beatles tribute band at the time with some buddies from college, and they had one of these, and I like had to get one. It looks super cool, but more importantly, it sounds awesome. So it looks, it looks very 70s, but it's got a lot of great piano sounds. It's got really great like Wurlitzer, Rhodes sounds. It's got some Mellotron string sounds, and it's got the 1 or 2 synth sounds it has are like the Van Halen jump synth. I don't remember what synth that was, but it's got that synth sound. It's got, all your array of organ sounds as well. And it also does a clav sound, which I don't use too often, but like it's there if we ever need it. And it's got so many, me being a guitar player first, the interface of this is super friendly because it's not a bunch of screens and menus, it's all knobs, like very similar to tweaking an amp. And it's got modulation, reverb, delays built into it, as well as for the electric keyboard sounds and organ sounds, you have like different amp types you can sift through. There's 5 or 6, and then you can also drive the amp. There's a drive button to drive it harder, and there's a actual tube built into it too, which is awesome. So that thing sounds awesome. And then this was a bitch to get down here, but this is a very heavy piece of wood. I think this was made in the 50s. It's like the little brother or sister to, well, it's roughly the same size, but the Hammond B3 is the most popular, Hammond organ, but this is the Hammond M3, which was kind of, I think maybe like a student model basically of the B3, but it sounds awesome. I've tracked this on quite a few like singer-songwriter records. It's got this really, really funky thing to start it. You have to you gotta turn it on, and then it's gotta catch the rotor. Yeah, there she goes. There we go. Yeah, super fun. All right, we'll turn that off so it doesn't start a fire, because it's from the 50s and it still only has, is one of my projects on the list of things to do, is it's only 2-prong. So I need to have an electrician, put the 3-prong ground on it. But yeah, so this is kind of keyboard land. At my little mix room in Studio B, which is in my house, if we ever need to track like a real piano, I have a beautiful Yamaha U1 upright piano at home, which is like classic. And that came from a place I used to teach lessons at that my buddy Harry owns, the Instrument Barn in Huntley. It's a great place for pianos, all kinds of musical instruments. So we do have a real upright piano, it's just not here, it's at Studio B, so if we ever need a track piano, we can always go over there. Now my babies, Guitar World. I'm a guitar player first. I play bass and keyboard. I play a little bit of drums, but if we're ever doing like a singer-songwriter session, and unless it's something really simple and the budget is really low, like I'll play drums, but I'm much rather hire like a session drummer or somebody I know, because I am not a drummer. But I'm a guitar player first, then also bassist, and I play some keys. First acoustic guitar. I've had this one the longest of all the acoustic guitars. This is my first nicer acoustic growing up. So this is like the Epiphone version of the John Lennon J160E, and it's not an open G now, but because I have another guitar that you'll see, this usually stays in open G, so I usually have an electric that's an open G for an alternate tuning for different inspiration when we're tracking things and doing overdubs. But I also usually have this guitar, an acoustic option, just left in open G, so it's ready to go for just an alternate flavor or tuning. I'll take these guys out. Gotta humidify your guitars. There's a humidifier in here too, but you can never go wrong with keeping them in good shape. This is one of my favorite guitars. This is a 1965 Gibson B25 12 string, but this thing really sings. Yeah, but this thing finds its way on a lot of records, especially my own music and the bands that I'm in. This gets used like all over the place. This came from another place I used to teach guitar and bass lessons at in Crystal Lake, Piano Trends. Some guy found this in his closet in the case. He was moving to Florida or something, and he was cleaning, or his parents were moving to Florida or something, and this was just found in a closet. And this is an amazing guitar. I got it on a super great deal because I worked there and because the guy who brought it in had no idea what it was. But yeah, this thing has made it onto a lot of records. Also, I'm a songwriter too, so if I'm looking for inspiration, just a little bit of a different sound, this is always a go-to guitar if like a 6-string acoustic or electric isn't quite like giving me the right vibe. This is probably my favorite guitar. I got this is a Gibson J160E reissue from the 90s, and this guitar has gone with me so many places. The 12 string I've only had for maybe like 10 years, but I bought this guy when I was, I think I was in high school when I bought this, maybe middle school, but this is just like a workhorse guitar for songwriting. It sounds incredible. If you can't tell, I'm a huge fan of, I love Fenders, especially for basses, like that's my favorite bass, and I love Fender guitars too, but for guitar, I've always resonated more with Gibsons, especially the acoustics. Gibsons are just my favorite, and with being a recording studio, I find that Gibson acoustics, they always track super well. They always sit really nicely in a mix. I've written so many songs on this guitar. This guitar has been with me all over the country playing gigs, especially with like the Beatle group, and all the other things that I do. This is just like a great workhorse acoustic guitar. As you can see, it's gotten a lot of use. I've dug quite a bit into right above the pickguard there. It's got like a lot of wear, but like I take care of my guitars, but I'm not super precious. Like if I'm gonna buy a guitar, I want to use it all the time. I want to be able to play it at shows, which I understand. If you have like a '59 Gibson Les Paul, which can be worth like 30 grand nowadays, you don't want to be taking it to shows and whatnot for fear of like, it breaking in half, because that's also like a huge investment. This was used quite a bit in my Beatles tribute band as well. This is George Harrison used an SG a lot. In like 66 and onward, he used the SG here and there on songs. This was originally my buddy's, who was at the time the George Harrison in my Beatles tribute band, but I bought it from him for a super good deal about 5-ish years ago. This is one of my favorite guitars. It's just a straight up 61 reissue SG. It's out of tune, but it rings great. It's awesome. It's, you know, it's got the humbucker thing. So that's great on a lot of different recordings. I like having a variety of guitar for if somebody's coming in to record. Everybody loves their own guitars or whatever, but if we need a different flavor, I've pretty much got everything covered. You know, we've got an SG, so something with humbuckers. We've got something with P90s, which I think is honestly my favorite pickup and what I find most versatile. This is a John Lennon Revolution Casino. This thing is awesome. I used this in like jazz band in high school. It's a very versatile guitar, but this thing also just sounds great. Also slightly out of tune. Yeah, this thing is awesome. It's got a little bit more of a warmer sound than the SG. I've got something with humbuckers, P90s, and then this Rickenbacker has single coils in it. When I first started my band, the Phonographs, which isn't a thing anymore, this was like, weirdly, this one's more in tune than those other ones, and I've played those more recently. This is a great in-between sound of a lot of the stuff I have. So it's got single coils in it. You can do a lot of like, you can do a lot of bendy, you know, twangy stuff. It's not a Telecaster, but it kind of like can get in that, it can get in that, like, in that vibe. And this is great for like, a lot of times we'll be doing a production or something with a singer-songwriter, and I like to overdub when the song calls for it or the production needs it, like a jangly guitar part. And sometimes that'll be, you know, the acoustic, the Gibson J160, or it'll be the 12-string capoed. But sometimes if it's an electric guitar, this is like jangle land. So this, you know, throw a capo on and just play some like arpeggiated stuff with a whole lot of chords that share the same notes type of thing. This gets used a lot for that. It's a great rhythm guitar. It's a great, you know, single coil sound. So this and a Vox AC30 is amazing. This was my main guitar. I was in a band for a short amount of time called Barbara, which was like a shoegazy, fuzzy, like indie rock band. And I played lead guitar in that band, and this was my main guitar. And we also have like the other single coil flavor if we need the Strats over there. I like to leave it in open G, as I mentioned before. And then this is another headphone station. This is like the headphone distribution station for the whole live room. So all of the little monitor boxes run to this one, and then this runs into the control room. And then we've got another AC30 here, which is always mic'd up with a 57. I've got this Class 5 Marshall that I picked up a couple of years ago from also the Instrument Barn in Huntley, which is a great place to find gear. That thing sounds amazing. It does the Marshall thumpy thing, and it's like in a small footprint. It's really easy. I wanted something smaller, and I wanted a different vibe than, like, you know, obviously I have a lot of Vox stuff here, but I'm slowly acquiring, you know, as you do, different amps with different flavors for myself and for sessions here and whatnot. So that thing sounds great. That's got a, you know, a different vibe, but very like 70s rock. But a lot of people just automatically think of the AC30 as like the jangly amp, but the AC30 is built this version anyway. You have a master volume and you have a regular volume, so you can drive into the AC30 pretty much and get some crunchy tones without having to throw on a pedal or anything. But both huge amp workhorses in the studio. I kind of color code my cables, so like guitars are always on blue cables and the keyboards are mostly on red, and then various things are on black cables, vocals are black, but the bass, as you can see, are on orange. It's kind of purposeful and technical. It looks cool to have a couple different colors, but also like if we're in the middle of a session and there's an issue, like a mic's dying or something, it's more easier to troubleshoot than having to like go to one of the boxes, you know, have to go through all the cables. It's just easier to troubleshoot stuff and find lines when there's an issue. So that's kind of the reason behind the different color-coded cables.
It's very convenient.
Yeah, and then we've got more headphones over there. Those are the AKGs. That's just an old guitar stand that we kind of like throw headphones on. Over here, this is kind of like miscellaneous live room storage. So my pedal board is up here. We've got all kinds of cool stuff. Anything that's not up, like I said before, mic-wise, I try to keep as much stuff set up as possible, but anything that's not getting used is living in this mic drawer. So I've got like another just 58, SM58, which I use a lot for guide vocals, and honestly that paired with a some type of Neve preamp sounds really good. And I've done a few sessions here where we've just used that like scratch guide vocal of SM58 into a Warm Audio 73 is like, and just kept that the vocal chain because it sounded great. And we didn't have a bunch of bleed because it's a dynamic mic. Yeah, and then these are just kind of like throwaway mics. This Samsung like 58 knockoff, and then just this cheap digital reference mic. I just throw these up sometimes if we need like extra talkback mics when there's a band in the room. And then somebody had passed away at one of the instrument stores I worked on, and the guy's wife had brought a bunch of his old gear in to either sell or do something with, and this is one of the mics like in that bag, and it's just like a shitty, the brand is Voice of Music, but I've used this as like a little shitty like dirt mic, like a room mic for drums, or just I mic'd up a guitar amp with this recently too on a Hazy Grace session. For one of his songs recently, I think we mic'd up a guitar cab with this just for a different sound. And I think we double mic'd it, but we pulled this off, and this is kind of like a dirty like room mic sound for a guitar amp. And then these are the two new mics that I just got. They came from Australia. They're kind of like a prosumer Sony mic that not a lot of people know about. The model is Sony ECM 56As, I think. Yeah, 56As. These are a interesting microphone. They're condensers, but the circuitry is a little different. You don't have to have one to use it. Never seen a mic, but it takes like a 9-volt battery. It's a low impedance mic, so similar to a really common podcast vocal mic that I don't have, but the Shure SM7B, they have very low output, so you always have to crank them up with like a preamp or one of those like cloud lifters or something. And this is similar. I haven't gotten to try these out yet because I just got them, but they're gonna live on drum overheads. I realized after I bought them that they came from Australia and these were made in Japan, so like the mic clip part, this is like bigger than the US standard mic clip, so I gotta find some adapters and buy those to get them up to use. But yeah, I'm super excited to check those out. They have a cool switch on them too, like there's a little bit of an EQ curve on these, so you can have it off, which will just be flat, but they have a switch for if you're recording like voiceover or a singer, or if you're doing music. So there's like an M and a V on the back, and you can switch between the two, which is cool. I watched a lot of like as many demos and reviews as I could on these, and they sound really great. I bought them to use because I've been looking for something else, a little bit of an upgrade for drum overheads, and these have a really smooth top end, which is what I was looking for, and so I'm super excited to try those out. These are just, you know, mic boxes for the stuff that's up. We've got some extra like guitar pedals and accessories in here. There's an old spring reverb unit that sometimes I'll wire in the control room to use for recording or for mixing. Got a little A/B switch, so if we're doing like a huge like wall of guitar sound, we can have like 2 amps running through somebody's pedal board or multiple different guitars. Like having an A/B ABY switch is like super helpful a lot with guitar stuff. And then I've got just a bunch of random DIs. This little looper, Boss looper pedal that barely gets used, but it's in there. Yeah, and then this is just miscellaneous cables, extra stuff for certain things. Power supplies, blah, blah. And then this is a drawer of fun. This is just a bunch of auxiliary percussion, which I find is super important for tracking, especially in a production. A lot of people don't think about or like frown on wasting time on like auxiliary percussion, and I think that's silly because a lot of times this can make a track and it's not something in the forefront, but it's a vibe, it brings something to a song, and I think, yeah, auxiliary percussion is super important, super useful in productions. A lot of times it ends up tying everything together. If we want to take a look, I got like this pedal board is my personal pedal board. We have it set up sometimes for certain guitar sessions. Just some run-of-the-mill standards, like I got a tube screamer, gotta have the Boss chromatic tuner. I've got a couple different overdrive pedals. The JHS Morning Glory is a great overdrive pedal. The Strymon Deco, which is kind of like a underrated, not as well-known Strymon pedal, but it's supposed to emulate kind of like a tape machine sound. So it's got, on the left side of the pedal, it's got saturation and drive. So that's another like overdrive circuit. And then on the right side, there's a like delay. Even if you turn it all the way up, it gets almost into reverb territory. It does delay. You can do like some tape flange and phase settings with it too. And then you have a blend knob between the two sides of the pedal, which is super cool. This is super useful. I've used this a lot. This is something I have used sometimes when mixing that gets some cool effects. I've got a couple different fuzz pedals. Classic full tone octave fuzz for all your like Jimi Hendrix style fuzz. This octave multiplexer is really cool. It almost gets into like synthland territory, but I used to use this all the time because my brother and I had a duo for a little bit where it's just bass and drums, kind of like Black Keys, White Stripes-ish. But I had two rigs running. I had like a guitar rig, and then I was also running my guitar through a bass rig, and I used this all the time with that band to get like an octave down sound for like riffs and stuff. And then this is, this is my newest pedal. I bought this a couple years ago from a shop in Wisconsin. It's a JHS Bender, so it's a recreation of the pedal from the 70s, fuzz pedal. Sounds awesome. It was made in England in the early 70s, but that's a great fuzz tone. And then I've got classic MXR flanger that can do flange. It can also, like, if you dial it back, can almost do like a phase sound as well. And then you've got a MXR carbon copy analog delay, which is a great sound. And then, you know, you gotta have a wah pedal. This drawer is just miscellaneous like guitar storage shit. We've got extra straps, lots of extra strings, pedal boxes, all that jazz. And then there's just more storage, mic boxes, all that goodness. So yeah, that's pretty much everything in the live room. Oh, let me show you where the bodies are buried. This corner of the studio is just like storage, so we've always got extra guitar stands. There's an extra cymbal stand there, extra mic stands. But this closet is extra storage. So sometimes my band and other bands will practice here. There's a, live PA down there that we pull out and use with those speakers when we're having a rehearsal here or something. Mic, flight case storage in there, the guitar cases, but there's also, the reason I open this, because there's another drum kit in here. So we have two drum kits here. This other kit is a more recent Ludwig kit. I want to say it's from around like the 2010s, I think, was when my brother bought it brand new. But his drums live here. He's a drummer. He doesn't do a ton of drumming anymore, so his all of his drum gear just lives here, which is great for me. And for anybody coming to the studio, if you want to get in here, this color is super cool. It's this cool ruby red sparkle. So we've got, and this is a club date kit, so it's a little smaller kit than the classic 65 Ludwig kit. I think this kick drum is a 20-inch, and I think that kick drum is a 22, but I think the toms are similar size. I think this floor tom is 16, and then the tom, which is buried in here, is either a 13 or a 12. But I just wanted to show this. There's also a snare drum, a matching snare drum with this that's in here that we pull out if we need for a different snare drum sound, but this is just another kit we have available here. This kit's a little better for anything like in the jazz realm or like blues stuff, but I mean, even for that stuff, that kit's phenomenal, and it's vintage, it sounds amazing, so that drum kit gets used the most. But we do have another option here. If somebody doesn't want to bring their kit, you know, we can always set up. This kit's always set up, but we can always set up, pull out the club date kit if needed for more of a jazz or blues vibe if it's not the right sound. And that kit is a little newer to the club date kit in the closet, so that's always an option. So we have two different drum sets here. There's a couple more different cymbal options in there too. We have some other Meinl cymbals, and between Meinls and Zildjians is pretty much what we have here. And I didn't talk about this earlier, but this Zildjian ride cymbal is the most vintage cymbal. This is from like the 60s. So like all the markings on it are completely worn off. You can only see that it says Zildjian like underneath the bell or somewhere underneath the... Just wanted to let you know we do have like another drum kit option. It lives in the closet most of the time, but we can always pull it out if needed. All right. This is the control room, the brain of the studio. So this is just for show, a little decoration piece, but there's a two-track reel-to-reel. I think it's like not even 1 inch. It's like 1/2 inch tape. And then just some like random stuff. The microphone I'm working on, but this is kind of like little knick-knack zone. I'm a subscriber to Tape Op. Shout out to Tape Op and Larry Crane. I get these, so these are always laying around the studio for downtime for people to read or for me to read when I'm like bouncing or printing mixes or whatever. If I'm on lunch over here, I'll read through those. Some guitar stuff, there's always a pile of picks there, some, you know, slides for slide playing. Gotta have pens and pencils and paper and everything, so we got a bunch of, you know, notepads in there for people who need to scribble out some lyrics, or I'll take notes sometimes when I'm mixing or make a track sheet real quick when we're doing a big recording session. And pro tip, lint roller. I'm not gonna open this one, but for everybody out there who's got like homemade sound panels with like felt on them, you know, hair gets on those pretty easily, especially if you have a dog or cat, and the lint roller really works for cleaning up those panels. All right, now on to the super fun zone. So the main interface I use here is, I love Audient products, so it's an Audient ID44, which is like the main interface hub, and then also the reason I love this one so much is I do enjoy the mic pre's in this for certain things, for like keyboards, sometimes drum overheads, acoustic guitar, and sometimes vocals. And I love that each preamp on here has phantom power, 10 dB pad, and a high pass filter. The other great thing about this interface is it doubles as a monitor controller, so it's also my monitor controller, so it's a good bang for the buck. Two sets of monitors going on here. So these are the Kali LP6s. The mix room I have at home is a little bigger and longer dimensions. So I have the Ion 8s there, which are a 3-way driver. These are only 2-way, but these work perfect for this room. They're front ported. I think Kali Audio is one of the best companies making monitors for the price. I think that was started roughly 7 years ago, the company Kali Audio in California. I think there were some people who worked at JBL and then they went and started their own company, but these Calis are amazing for the price. I think for the LP6s, I can't remember if I bought these new or if I bought them used on a Reverb, but these are like around 300-ish bucks for the pair, and they're phenomenal. They're very clear, they're very detailed, they're very accurate, and I find that a lot of my mixes translate very well between these, the Revo-Tone Mix Cube for like real world application, and then the Ion 8s I have at home, which are a 3-way speaker, which have even more detail than these. But when you have monitors, it's all about finding what works the best for your ears and the room they're in. And that is super important, and I found that these work super well in here. I had JBLs in here at one point. They were the first monitors I had, and they were just a little too small for this room, and they just didn't work the best in this room, but I found that these work great in this room. And then I have the bigger versions of these at home, which are phenomenal. And so those are my main monitors for mixing, is the Cali LP6s and the Cali Ion 8s, and they're fantastic for the money. And I've got this Revo-Tone Mix Cube, so it's just like a mono cube speaker, so monitor. It just kind of, I check mixes on that after I've been working on these or headphones for a while, and it's kind of a good reference for like people playing a mix or a master off of like their phone, or any kind of like consumer level stuff where it's just a lot of like mostly mid-range. That Revo-Tone Mix Cube is really great for checking mixes on for that purpose, because there's no low end, there's not much high end, it's pretty much all mid-range. So that's another really useful tool for like making sure your mid-range is sitting right in your mix. I also use my main mixing headphones are these Revo-Tone. These are the Planar 2 series headphones in cream. I love these. They're semi-open back or open back, I forget. They're not completely closed off, so that's great for mixing. The little console we have in here, so this is a Tascam M308B. It's not a super expensive little console, but it's great for me, and actually the mic preamps and EQ in these is actually pretty great. These were built late 70s, early 80s, I believe. The mic pre's sound pretty dang good in them. You can crunch stuff up really good, which is like I was talking about before with the drum talkback mic, the AKG D12. I'll crunch that mic on this console real good. So you have a mic pre trim up there as well as the fader, so I'll really kind of dial it in to get it a little crunchy and then just back it off on the fader and blend it in with the rest of the drum mix. But the EQs, there's a 3-band EQ on these. The low band and the mid band are sweepable, so the low band is sweepable from 50 hertz all the way up to 1K, which is like a huge range. So it's very useful for cutting and boosting what you need for tracking live. The mid range is sweepable from 200 to 4K, also a pretty wide range. And then the high band is just 10K, which is one of my favorite high-end sweetening frequencies. It's good for sparkly vibes. There's a 30 dB pad also on each channel, which comes in handy especially for drums. So what I run through this little console most of the time is guitars, bass DI, and bass cab, and then any of the guitar mics run through this. I don't like to do a ton of processing on guitar cabs going in, because unless it's a really clean tone, I might use a compressor on it. These mic pre's and EQs work great for like guitar cabs, bass cabs, any kind of like auxiliary stuff. I have currently the toms are running through this as well. That's kind of where toms have been living on channel 1 and 2 of this console for a long time. But this is a great little console. You have like flexible routing. I'm just using the direct out, so I'm just using each channel and then it's going direct out into the interfaces. So the ID44 is the main interface by Audient, and then I've got an expansion audio interface by Ferrofish, the Pulse 16, A to D and D to A converter. It's just 16 analog ins and outs. So that's how I'm incorporating all of the analog gear, all the mic preamps are running into that interface, and it's daisy chained to the Audient. My favorite mic pre of all time is a Neve 1073, so I have a couple different versions of that. I have the Warm Audio WA73 with the EQs. This is one of my favorite EQs, especially for tracking. You can get pretty specific and surgical if you need to, and I don't like to get super duper surgical when I'm tracking, but if you need to cut a lot of like mid or lows out, it's great. It's got phantom power, polarity switch. There's a tone switch on there for different mic impedances. There's a line level switch on it. You can just plug straight in for like a bass DI or something, which is useful. And this is super helpful because like every once in a while, if I'm tracking a live band and there's somebody singing and also playing acoustic guitar, sometimes I'll throw them in the corner of the back here behind me in the control room, so we get some separation. But it's great to have a couple mic pre's that just have the XLR straight on the front too, as well as in the back. So if you need to do anything on the fly, that's really easy to do. And we also have the Warm Audio. And we also have the Warm Audio preamp version of this guy. So just the WA273. So there's two 1073 preamps in there. Same thing as these guys, just this one doesn't have the EQ circuit in it. A lot of times, you don't always have to EQ stuff on the way in, especially if your mic placement is good and you've got the right tone coming from the instrument. A lot of times you don't need to EQ. And that's where these things come in handy. I use this a lot for drum overheads, which I almost never EQ drum overheads, even when I'm mixing, unless it really needs it, a little crisp or some low mids cut out. But like just running over drum overheads through these with the high pass filter on about 80 is just perfect. And then these have all the same switches as these guys. You got phantom power, polarity, tone switch for mic impedance, instrument insert. There's inserts on the back of both of these, so if I didn't have a patch bay, you could insert like a whole chain. So you could do like this guy and then a compressor or any other outboard gear you wanted. So it's both of these have inserts on each channel. The way I'm running all of the mic lines from the live room, from the two boxes out there, all the mic lines come into the patch bay, and then I can patch from this top patch bay as all the mic ins from all the mic lines, and from there I can patch into any of the outboard gear. So if I want to run, that's the other super great thing. If you have any analog gear, having a patch bay is super awesome because it allows really flexible routing. So like if I'm doing like an album with a whole band and there's some variance between songs, some of them are like kind of like really rocking, but then there's some like sweet ballads and we need to change up like the mic preamp for something because it just isn't working. It's like 2 seconds. I can just patch out of it, patch in to a different mic preamp, try it, audition it, see if that works, and then keep moving. It's really quick. It makes making decisions super quick and easy too when you're tracking. Having patch bays is awesome. I've got on the second patch bay is all the outboard gear, so all the preamps. I've got this ART channel strip, which is great. It's a tube preamp, and then there's a parametric EQ and a optical compressor built into it. So this usually lives on my drum mono mic, which is usually pulled off the kit a little bit. I love pairing tube preamps with ribbon mics. That's just like a really great sound and something I always go for, especially with like a mono drum mic. That always gets processed a little bit. I usually cut a lot of lows out of that and a lot of low mids. Because that's a ribbon mic, this is really great for dialing that in because there's a lot of gain on this tube preamp, so I can push it hard in. It's got like a pretty wide impedance switch on it, which is great when you're using a ribbon mic, because those have different impedance than a dynamic or a condenser, so that's super helpful. And then there's a lot of EQ options, and I am always tapping the compressor on this a bit. When I'm doing drums live, I usually compress at least a few of the mics on the way in, especially the ones that are kind of like auxiliary microphones and aren't the main sound. If I had more of these, These are great. The 560As, they're originally like a 19-inch space rack unit, but they have come out with a 500 series version of them, and they're a great all-around workhorse compressor. A lot of people have used them in the past super heavily on drums. So the most classic use case for those is like kick and snare, which I do from time to time, but a lot of time when I'm tracking, I only have a couple compressors available, so I have to choose wisely, especially if I'm doing a whole band. So this lives a lot of time when I'm trying to crush something for vibe or sound with a drum sound. So like the crotch mic gets smashed through that compressor a lot when we're doing drums. And then when we're doing overdubs, you know, not a lot of people use these for acoustic guitar or for vocals, or they're not known as much for those, but I find a great use for using this when doing overdubs for like acoustic guitars and for vocals. So that's kind of like my favorite compressor I have. My brother built this preamp in college for his audio class, but it's a Sound Sculptor French company. Somewhere in Europe, the guy makes these kits and you can build them or you can buy them and put together, but it's a great spot-on recreation of a Neve 1073 preamp and a 500 series unit. That also sounds great. As you can tell, I love Neve 1073 preamps. It's my favorite one. When we're doing drums, this is usually on the crotch mic as well. So this whole channel is usually for the crotch mic. I try when I'm tracking drums to have a couple auxiliary mics for vibe. So I'll blend in the crushed like talkback AKG D112, and then we have the mono kit mic, which is another vibe that we kind of play around with, and then we have the crotch mic. Well, this is, you know, you gotta have a power conditioner, so Furman power conditioner, and then the main brain for the whole monitor, the personal monitor mixes, the Behringer guys power play, that's the main hub for all of that. And then, oh, we didn't talk about this yet. So my main DAW controller is this SSL. It's the UF8, I think is what it is. I love having some actual faders to control everything in the digital audio workstation. So it's super useful for mixing. And when I'm recording, if I need to change some levels or pan some stuff when we're listening back, it makes doing all that stuff way faster. It's way better to, in my opinion, to write automation in the recording software using an actual fader than doing it with a mouse. I just find this is way more creative, it's way more musical. And this thing is super flexible. You can route sends to it, so you can do fader throws for delays and everything. It's phenomenal. It's got solo cut select on each channel, it's got a pan pot for each channel. There's 8 faders, but you can bank through all the ones in your session really easily. And I found a lot of people complain that the newer SSL, they have this, there's one controller that also controls plugins, and then there's one that's just like a big transport control, but a lot of people are like, well, it's weird that they don't have the one thing that does a transport control. I've seen this online a lot on YouTube. I watch a lot of recording YouTube videos and tutorials and everything, and if you hold the channel button on this unit, you actually get a transport control down here. So you can scroll through your session timeline with the left and right arrows, and the top arrow is play and the bottom arrow is stop. And then you have the record button in the middle for when if you're tracking anything, which makes it super useful. There's a little MIDI controller keyboard down there that we use if we need to do some MIDI drums or some, you know, weird synthesizer sounds that the 2 keyboards out there don't cover. I've got some virtual instrument synths and pianos, and I've got a really great Mellotron. So the SV, the Korg SV1 out there does like a string Mellotron sound, but it doesn't have any other Mellotron sounds, so I've got a good virtual instrument for that, for like the flutes and the other Mellotron sounds. So that's what that gets pulled out a lot for, is for that Mellotron sound that I like to use in a lot of my productions. This is a new setup I have. I did have 2 smaller monitors in between the speakers before, but that was always supposed to be a temporary solution, but it turned into a 2-year solution because they were just there and I never moved them. But I wanted a better sight line into the live room. I've been trying this mixer brain thing. Andrew Masters, who I watch a lot of his videos, just recently did an interview and studio tour with him. And he has this whole concept and class and theory on what he calls mixer brain. And so his main point of that is trying to divide up the like looking at a computer screen doing audio editing versus like doing active listening and not looking at a screen, because no matter how much we try to tell ourselves that looking at a screen isn't affecting our ears, it is. A lot of people see with their eyes even if they don't realize it. So I've tried to get the screen away from my main mix position in between the monitors, so I'm only listening and not being influenced by what I'm looking at. Even just the fact that there's different colors on there can influence subconsciously your ears and moves you'll make with mixing. So we have this amp case that is just a little like kind of hybrid standing desk thing that I can move around. So if I'm doing a bunch of computer work, looking at the screen, doing audio editing, I just kind of can live over here. If I need to stand up during a session, I can control a lot of the keyboard and mouse moves with the SSL UF8 controller, but if I need the keyboard, I can just, roll this over here. It's super flexible. This is a big Samsung screen, so it's nice. We've got some treatment in this room. I'm always looking at doing more treatment, but again, the wood paneling on the back wall diffusion here, that was all here when we moved in, and then I've just added these like bass traps in the corner. You have some panels up. Shout out to Amazon for these cool orange chairs and the little side tables. So we've got a spot for the artist to sit and hang out when we're mixing or we're doing overdubs. Whoever's not playing can hang out in here, and we can always pull more chairs in here for more people to sit. Software wise, so the DAW I use is Cakewalk by BandLab, which is now their new version of it. The professional level of it is called Sonar, which is what it was called forever ago. I started using Sonar, which was created by the software company. Originally it was called Cakewalk. At some point Roland bought them, and then they went out of business because Gibson bought Roland at one point, and then the whole Cakewalk Sonar, the software, the digital audio workstation kind of went away for a while. And then this company in Singapore that makes this app called BandLab for mobile devices. It's just a quick little mobile device recording software. They picked it up and then kind of reworked it from the ground up, kept a lot of the, the baseline stuff the same, but then made a bunch of improvements. And that was the most stable. The old version, which was called Sonar, was fairly stable, but the new when Cakewalk or when BandLab took it over, it was the most stable version ever. And with all software you run into issues here and there, but this has been super stable. The new version has been super stable. And the awesome thing about this for the longest time is it was completely free. So for people who are doing home studios or a lot of home recording, this has always been a great option because it was a full-fledged DAW but completely free. I know GarageBand is free and comes with a lot of Macs. It has its limitations, you can't do groups, you can't do buses, but this can do all the stuff Pro Tools can do. And I've never really been an Apple person, so everything here is Windows. I've got a very similar Windows computer at home, and I've got a laptop, a Samsung laptop that I can do mobile recording if I need it for that. I've always been a Windows guy. And the other thing with Sonar, the new version might work on Mac, but all of the previous versions were only Windows based, so that's also why I've stuck with Windows. And there's always a debate about Windows versus Mac for audio production and for creative people, but honestly, they both have their pros and cons. I feel it shouldn't be as much of a conversation as it still is sometimes. You can do great work on both, and that's really what it's about. So I always look for software stuff that gets out of the way and just works. Then that's also technical brain as an engineer when you're mixing. And when you're tracking and recording, like you want to know the technical stuff well enough that you don't have to think about it too much, and it's just like second nature muscle memory, so that you can tap into the creative side of your brain for, you know, tracking and working with artists and working with the song. And you always just have to do what's best for the song no matter what. So, and if we want to see something else, we do have like a little kitchenette situation in here. So we've always got coffee, we've always got water, we've always got like snacks for people when they come in. So we've got a bunch of tea, you know, singers love tea and honey. We've always got coffee, tea, honey, snacks, drinks. I'm a big Spindrift drinker, so we always have that in the fridge, that sparkling water. And there's always snacks. And then if you want to get this real quick, this is, I'm not sponsored, but I love Sweetwater, and I've ordered so many things from Sweetwater. As everybody knows, you get candy sent, and this is how much stuff I've ordered from Sweetwater. I have drawers of the candy I haven't eaten in here. Oh, that's tea. I think I've whittled it down to just one drawer of all the Sweetwater candy, so shout out to Sweetwater. Yeah. And yeah, and then yeah, so this is a little kitchenette, garbage in here. We try to keep this, you know, separate from all the gear and the music stuff. So we've got a little electric kettle. I love French press coffee, so that's always going on in here. And yeah, we always want to have stuff for the artists. So if anybody ever, you know, has certain requests, we'll always have that for them when they come in. Make sure we have plenty of tea, or their favorite tea, or their favorite drink, or whatever. Our main goal is to make great music and make people's sonic dreams a reality, as well as make everyone as comfortable as possible. That's when the creativity flows. That's when you get the greatest performances, I've found.
Here in Revo-Tone Studios with Colin.
Hello.
Our studio owner. And yeah, so tell us about how this all came to be.
So when my family moved to Woodstock, this was like my childhood home before my parents got divorced. The people that lived here before had started building out a studio down here, and I'd been playing guitar for like 3 or 4 years, and my brother had just started playing drums. So part of the reason my parents actually bought this house was because this had like a dedicated music space for us. And like over the years, once we formed our first band, which happened to be like a Beatles tribute band, we did that for many years, and we played all across the Midwest, and we played in other parts of the country as well. But we practiced here for the longest time. As I got more into music and more into like being curious about recording, I bought my first like recording software and interface and speakers and all that when I was in somewhere in between like late middle school, like early high school, and I started recording stuff down here. And then over the years, like there's some stuff in here that is my brother's, that's just always here. His drum sets are both stay here, and there's a couple pieces of there's like a microphone and a preamp that is his that just kind of live here. Built it up over the years. It's mostly like my thing now because he's busy with other stuff. They left some of the acoustic treatment here, so like all the diffusion was left here, all the wood paneling was left here. They already had the 2 rooms divided. A lot of stuff in the live room was left up, and then we've like filled it out as needed, and there's always more that we can do. There's more stuff I want to do in here acoustic treatment wise. Buying gear and acquiring more gear and the appropriate microphones, and a lot of times like whatever project I'm working on, sometimes it requires like a purchase, or I think, you know, for whatever the project is, the artist, the type of band, the type of music, like sometimes it will require me to like need to acquire a piece of gear, and so I do, and then I always have it for future use. Equipment-wise, gear-wise, I've just been building up the studio over the years, kind of ever since middle school, high school is when I first started like recording stuff down here for fun with friends. Started recording some of my bands I was in at the time, and then And about 2015 was when I started opening the studio up to other people and having like friends, bands, and friends who are singer-songwriters like come in and record. And then it just has kind of grown from there. I work with like a wide variety of artists, but it's mostly, you know, like singer-songwriters and like rock bands, indie rock bands. I've worked with a few harder rock projects. I also, you know, when I first started acquiring recording equipment, it was for my own projects. I'm a singer-songwriter too and an artist, and so I wanted to be able to record myself because at the time I didn't have the money to go to a studio, so I just wanted to try to teach myself as much as I could, and that's kind of how it's been. I've read a lot of books, watched a lot of videos, recording tutorials and studio tours and acoustic treatment videos on YouTube, and I've done a lot of research and watching documentaries and, like I said, reading books, audiobooks, all that kind of stuff. And I've just gained the knowledge by teaching myself over the years. I mean, I did go to Columbia for a few years, more like on the musician side, but I had a lot of friends that were in the recording department, so I mean, one of the beautiful things about music and recording is like there's always something new to learn. There's always like growth to be had, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. And yeah, this studio is, you know, ever and always changing. You know, I just configured the room a little bit, like we talked about earlier. While we were walking around, I've reconfigured this room a little bit from what it was like about a year ago, and the live room is a little bit more sectioned off into quadrants for like certain instruments and purposes than it once was, but yeah, it's always evolving. Something that's the most important thing to me is always doing what's best for the song. And I'm not saying that other people don't have that intention. And honestly, like I don't see other studios in the area is like competition necessarily. I know a few of the people that own studios in the area, not like through friends of friends kind of. I've interacted with them before. There's one that I've recorded at before when I was much younger with my Beatles tribute band, but I try not to look at it as competition. It's more of like everybody's got their own vibe and their own thing that they do. So the biggest thing I try to take home here is my mindset for recording was very much like the old school mindset for recording, like trying to get the best sounds that we can get when we're going to tape or going to Sonar or Pro Tools or whatever digital workstation we're using to record. I'm very much of the school of thought of like get it as right and as good sounding as possible. Try to make it sound the closest to like a finished record you can in the recording process, because it makes everything else easier. When you go to mix, when you go to master, it makes that whole process just overall better, in my opinion. And so that's why I'm always sleuthing and after like acquiring more outboard analog gear, but that's just like the sound that resonates with me, and that's the philosophy that resonates with me too. So like EQing, compressing stuff that needs to be compressed on the way in, going to tape, going to the computer, going to the interfaces. I really like to get into the nooks and crannies of the songs with the artist from like a producer perspective. I'm not afraid to like offer up constructive criticism and offer, you know, arrangement tweaks if I think it needs it. Because again, one of the most important things to me is doing what's best for the song and doing what's best for the artist to complete their like creative vision and what they're going for. I always have a pretty good idea in my head once I hear somebody's song, even if it's just a phone demo of like what I think the full final production should sound like. And so the whole fun of like recording, mixing and mastering it is like trying to achieve like what I've heard in my head from like hearing the demo or hearing the song for the first time when the artist comes in to record it. So I think those are some things that set me apart. I mean, I think I go for a vintage vibe, or like a good blend between like old school mentality and techniques as well as new school. Like I don't really do any mixing outside of the box. I'm mostly in the box in the computer for mixing, and I use all the analog gear for like mostly for tracking. I'd like to get to the point would have to like reconfigure the patch bays in the studio a little bit. I would like to start incorporating like analog gear into mixing, but that's a whole nother can of worms, because when it comes to recalling something, if you need to make a change for an artist or whatever, that makes it more difficult. You become a little less flexible in that way, being able to do recalls, but the sonic character that analog gear imprints is like, you know, there's all these debates on like what's better, what's the way you should do it, and I don't know, it's just always a sound that I've liked. So, and that's another thing I try to impart as well is I always try to do what's right for the song, but it's also important that you like what you're working on and you like the sound of what you're doing. So, I mean, I'm always open to like crazy ideas, you know, creative ideas from artists when it comes to recording and mixing and like trying new things. I'm all about like trying new tactics, new tricks that I haven't done before. And that's kind of another thing I try to employ in my productions is like every time I record something, every time I mix something, I try to do at least like one thing that I haven't done before, or maybe like use one piece of gear, one plugin. There are standard things or certain things that I do. We all get into that with like muscle memory, and once we have like a good process down. But I do try to get myself to come out of the box, you know, thinking wise about how to go about mixing or recording something, just to keep it fresh and not become too stale or too stagnant or complacent in like my process.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Trying to evolve every time you come back.
Yeah, and usually that ends up like, you know, you're always trying to level up. So like do at least like 5 to 10% better of a mix or of a recording than you did the last time. And it just compounds, and it's cool to see that growth too.
Yeah. Is there any interesting stories that have occurred in any of your studio sessions?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of great songwriters in the area that I've worked with. I've had a couple interesting situations I never thought I would have, like projects that I never thought I would have been involved with. I had a lady hire me to like clean up some audio because she had set up an audio recorder because she thought her boyfriend was cheating on her. So she hired me to like clean up some audio to figure out like what type of voice was in the background, and maybe not who it was, but like she thought he was cheating on her, which I don't think he was from my findings. But yeah, that was an interesting project. And then we don't just do music projects here. Like I've done a lot of projects like podcasts, like voiceover stuff. We've done a lot of audio editing for podcasts. There's one that comes to mind. So my brother went to Indiana University, and he had a friend there who started this podcast, but it was basically centered around the way they produced it was like an old time like radio show basically. So like 50s, 60s type radio show. And so the whole thing was set in like the 50s and 60s, and they had all these different characters. All of the music was the same ilk, but the bands were all different. So like there wasn't the Beatles, but there were like similar equivalents, I forget. And so because my brother and I had so much history doing the Beatles stuff, his friend hired us to record vocals. They had most of the songs written already, and we added a few things here and there, but like there was a song that was very similar to like Please Please Me by the Beatles that we did. We did the vocals to these like Beatlesy songs, and then we added a few things here and there. They had the basic like bass, one guitar, like drum tracks done in like scratch vocals, but they asked us to like do the real vocal takes, and then there's a song or two I added some guitar parts too and like harmonica. So that was a super fun project. And then I have an ongoing like podcast project I work on with a priest. So that's been interesting. It's a like Catholic based podcast series. So I've been doing work with him for about an entire year now. And then other non-standard like music singer-songwriter projects, I had somebody come in to do a voiceover session for this documentary that they've been working on for like years with some Irish filmmakers. Basically, long story short, this lawyer who lives not far from here, his dad was in the military during World War II and the Cold War. His plane went down off the coast of Ireland and he's been missing ever since, and nobody really knows what happened. The military kind of covered some stuff up or like lied to the family, so they've been investigating this for years, trying to figure out what happened to this guy's dad. He came in to do some voiceover and finish up some voiceover parts for the documentary, so. Yeah, it's not all music here. We do audio work. I mean, my favorite stuff to work on is like songs and to work with bands. But we do other stuff as well that I enjoy, like hearing all these stories. So much of what we do and what I do here is like, it's all centered around stories and songs and storytelling. And yeah, it's just really fun to be a part of all these projects.
Is there any advice that you would give to people like me or anybody else, like kind of breaking into this kind of field?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's some school of thought, like I was talking about earlier, of like, oh, we can fix this in the mix later. And I would highly advise against that, because you'll spend so much time doing that. Sometimes you can tell that the vibe isn't quite right, either with like a part that somebody's writing or working on. Instead of arguing, you know, with an artist or arguing with the other people in your band about it, it takes less time to just take 5 minutes and re-record it a different way if somebody has a suggestion, than arguing about it for 30 minutes, and that just makes for a better process for everybody. So try not being afraid to try new things, and to try, when you're recording, to record it to the best of your ability. And mic placement, which I mentioned a little bit before, is a huge part of it. You can change the complete EQ of a source by where you place the mic and not even touching an EQ. So that's another thing you can use to your advantage, especially just starting out. If you just have an interface and a microphone for recording, whoever you're recording, or if it's yourself, like move a mic around. Don't be afraid to experiment. There might be something you come across that you never would have thought of, like, oh, if I place the mic here, I get this vibe. And also, mic placement helps a lot when it comes time to mix. If you're trying to mix it yourself, or you're sending it off to someone else to mix for you, mic placement plays a huge role in the vibe. Like if you're going after kind of like a 50s sound for guitar, you'd be surprised. I mean, they didn't have a lot of mics at that time, so everything was like minimally mic'd. So you can totally place something in the mix by, instead of just direct micing a cab, pulling it off like 2 to 3 feet and just having it pick up also the room. I mean, that's a sound in itself, and really using the room and mic placement to your advantage, I think, is important. Cabling, I've always buy a longer cable than you need, because I've run into that in a lot of instances, especially once I got patch bays and there's like, we don't want to look behind there, it's like a rat's nest, but like the amount of cabling it takes, and like there've been so many times where I'm like, oh, 6 feet will be long enough, and it's like 2 inches short, and I'm like, come on. So always buy a longer cable. You don't need a bunch of gear to make something really cool. I finally had like a day off at home a couple weeks ago, and I like came up with this like spoof 80s song, like kind of like a hair metal track that I've written a couple songs like that before just for fun, because I just wanted to try to do it. And I made a really good recording with just a small audio interface and one cheap like microphone that I have at home. Well, 2, I just have a 57, and then I had like a cheap MXL condenser microphone that my wife had been given as a gift years ago, because that's what was in my home setup. Creativity is king over whatever gear you have. I made like a really good sounding track for what I had, and it was worth it because the song was really good. And so I think that's something that a lot of people should keep in mind as well. And that's a challenge in itself. Sometimes limitations breed productivity and creativity versus having so many things. That's another thing with like digital audio workstations. You can have like so many different types of compressors because of plugins and everything. I get new things occasionally like everybody else, but I really try to limit how many plugins I have because I hate option paralysis. So I usually try to go for something that I know and that's easy, doesn't have like a lot of knobs or a ton of different settings, just so I can get to my end goal. And that also allows me to work fairly quickly as well. It stops you from like taking too long on something, which that's also a challenge. You can get sucked into doing audio. You can get sucked into like trying to work on a snare tone for like 3 hours, and then you listen to it the next day and you're like, that sounds like ass. Yeah. Because like the most important thing too is like perspective. That's always a challenge. That's why as I get older, I take more breaks especially when I'm mixing, because you can be mixing a song for like, 2 to 3 hours at a time, and if you don't take like a couple 10-minute breaks here and there, I mean, it's just a natural thing. Your ears get fatigued, and so making sure you have a fresh perspective. I also, like a couple years ago on mixing projects, I stopped trying to like work on them till they were done. I try to break them up into a couple hour sections and then work on something else and then come back to it, just so I always have a fresh perspective. Having fresh perspective is a challenge, but I really try to like hammer that home. And I've found the best thing for me anyway, and I know a lot of people would agree with this, is if I'm gonna work on mixing or mastering something, I like to try to work on it not long after I wake up in the morning, like after like an hour or something, like when in the morning when I haven't been doing a lot, haven't been talking to a lot of people, blah, 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 that's when I find my ears are the freshest. And I feel like most people would probably agree with that, but I found that to be huge in mixing and mastering, because it also helps me make decisions faster, because I have a very fresh perspective and I'm able to get stuff done quicker and more efficiently as well, because I'm making sure that I keep that fresh perspective in mind. Your ears will get fatigued and they will start to play tricks on you after a while, which goes back to that whole thing of, like I said before, like working on a snare tone for like 3 hours and then you're like, the next day it sounds like shit because you lost perspective, and then you start hearing, frequencies because you've been listening to it for so long. Sometimes we try to do too much with audio. Sometimes we think like we need to compress it, we need to EQ, all this stuff, but like the thing left alone pretty plainly with how it was recorded was just fine, and sometimes that sits better in the mix too.
I'm wondering if you could go over some of your music background over the years, and maybe if that was the inspiration to start all of this.
Yeah, kind of. I started playing guitar when I was 7, and I started taking lessons fairly soon after I got a guitar. And funny enough, when I first I was always interested in music from a young age, and I remember I originally wanted to play drums because for some reason some of the bands I had seen around the local area, and like the church I went to at the time had like a contemporary band, and for whatever reason I always paid attention to the drummer as a kid. In hindsight, maybe it's because subconsciously as a child somehow I knew that like rhythm was super important, I don't know, for the feel and the vibe and everything. But I made the last minute decision to learn how to play guitar because I was like, well, I can take a guitar anywhere, but I can't take a drum set anywhere. So thus started my guitar journey. Then my family moved, and we moved to this area, to Woodstock, and when I was 11, I started my first band, which turned into being like a Beatles tribute band, and I did that for years from when I was 11, and we had a company and everything with that band eventually, and we had a manager, the whole thing, and we were playing a lot of shows, especially in the summertime. We played some pretty cool shows. We got to play the House of Blues, We got to play at the Rosemont Theater. We played at the Genesee Theater in Waukegan. We played Navy Pier's Land Shark Beer Garden, or it's probably something else beer garden now. We played some minor league baseball stadiums. I got a ton of experience playing in a band, playing music growing up. There was always music on in the house. I was always playing music with my brother. My neighbor is how we started the band. My brother and I and my neighbor who lived next door, he was a pianist and he had started learning playing guitar too, and so we were just always playing music. As we got into like middle school and high school, we all kind of got interested in like recording a little bit, and so like I mentioned before, I'd bought some recording gear, and like when we were in high school, honestly, instead of like going to parties and stuff in high school, we'd just come here on a weekend and like have a sleepover. And we would just play music forever. We went through like many different stages. I mean, we always like played Beatles music together because that was like our main band we had together, but we always screwed around. We wrote a ton of songs together. We went through different phases, like I just mentioned, of like we had an 80s phase where we played like a bunch of like Van Halen and Guns N' Roses because like we were just intrigued by like the guitar work. And we just wanted to try playing some new style of music versus Beatles, so we got into that for a while. We had like our pop punk phase where we were like writing pop punk songs and like creating funny parodies of like Yellow Card songs and stuff. And then I just got more serious about recording the older I got. I was just always super intrigued in the process, and any like documentaries that I watched about like my favorite bands and the Beatles, like, and they would talk about how they recorded music, and I always found it extremely interesting. And I still play music live too. I'm in a couple different bands. My wife and I have an original project, a 70s style rock band that's kind of like a cross between like the sound of Led Zeppelin, Tom Petty, and like Fleetwood Mac. And then I play out in a Rolling Stones tribute band right now too. So like I still so much love playing music and playing live. I pretty much just love everything involved with music. The recording side, I think, taps into my technical, but also like my very experimental part of my brain. There's a lot of different things you can experiment with too, like playing an instrument. But yeah, that's kind of like my trajectory. And then, yeah, like I said, in 2015, I like opened this place up to other people, and it's just always been like a ongoing, ever-growing like organism here.
What is the general plan for this place?
So, I mean, I want to continue like doing everything I'm doing now. I'm always trying to get new and more clients. Like I mentioned before, there's always more gear to buy, more improvements to do on the space, more acoustic treatment to do. But I'd also like to eventually graduate out of this place and have like a commercial spot or something on a separate building somewhere. Or like whenever my wife and I buy a house, like putting a building in the backyard or something like so many people have like in Nashville these days. That's kind of the trajectory I'm trying to go down, and I'm always looking to work with more artists, more musicians, and yeah, I'm always writing stuff here myself too. That's another thing that I do. A lot of the projects I work on, I produce or like co-write with the artists or help the artists arrange their song. Like I've had a lot of singer-songwriters come in and be like, I have this idea that I think is like a good chorus, but I don't know what to do with the rest of the song, and they come in and we sit down and like we have like a writing session. That's another thing I enjoy doing here, is like a lot of writing sessions. My goal is to like keep doing it, keep trying to grow it, keep working with new people, keep experimenting, trying new things all the time, and just growing it more and more. And yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that really covers it.
Awesome.
Thanks for showing us around and taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. Thanks.
It was nice to do this with
Yeah, very fun project. Thanks for coming and checking out the studio, guys. Thanks for having us. Peace, love, and rock and roll, everybody.